Good evening. Welcome to the July 22nd, 2021 meeting of the City of Frederick Historic Preservation Commission. Tonight's meeting will be conducted virtually due to the ongoing health emergency. In accordance with the governor's executive orders, members of the commission, staff, and applicants will all be attending the meeting remotely. The complete proceedings will be televised on Channel 99 and on the city's website. Public comment will be accepted on each agenda item. Those wishing to make public comment will be asked to call 301-600-6285, which was a different number than we have used in the past. During the staff presentation of the item they'd like to make comment on, your call will be answered in the order that it was received, and it will be transferred to the live feed of the meeting accordingly. Each person wishing to make public comment must state their name and general address, and then they'll be sworn in by the chair before providing testimony. Applicants, please join the meeting while the case immediately before your item is being discussed. When we call for your presentation after the staff report, please announce your name as well as those members of your team present this evening. At that time, I will read the oath, and each member of the team should state their name and signify "I do." Thereafter, all members of the team not speaking should mute their microphones. After your item has been voted on, we ask that you promptly leave the meeting. The technical qualifications of the commission and staff are on file with the City of Frederick and are hereby made a part of each and every case tonight. The City of Frederick Historic Preservation Commission uses the guidelines adopted by the Mayor and Board of Aldermen and the Secretary of the Interior's Standards for Rehabilitation, published by the National Park Service, U.S. Department of the Interior. These guidelines and standards are hereby made a part of each and every case and are applied as appropriate. All cases were duly advertised in the Frederick News Post in accordance with Section 301 of the Land Management Code. It is the purpose of the Historic Preservation Commission to safeguard the historical and cultural heritage of the City of Frederick by preserving sites, structures, or districts that reflect elements of cultural, social, economic, political, archaeological, or architectural history, to stabilize and improve property values of such sites, structures, or districts, to foster civic beauty, to strengthen the local economy, and to promote the preservation and appreciation of such sites, structures, and districts for the education and welfare of the residents of the City of Frederick. This time I will take roll of commissioners present. This is Commissioner Bonin. I am present. Commissioner Bailey.
Commissioner Bailey, I'm present.
Commissioner Horner.
Commissioner Horner, present.
Commissioner Seibert.
Commissioner Seibert, present.
Commissioner Alby.
Commissioner Alby, present.
Commissioner Saller. Commissioner Michael. And Commissioner DePietro.
Commissioner DePietro, present.
In order to be eligible to vote on an application, a member of the commission must have made the requisite site visit and attended any and all meeting at which such application was discussed. In the event that a member is absent from any such meeting, that member must have reviewed the minutes and listened to the tape recording thereof in order to vote on the application, and must enter into the record an oral or written statement that he or she has reviewed the minutes and listened to the tape recording. This time I will ask if there are any commissioners with any statements of eligibility or the need to recuse themselves from any of the cases this evening.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Horner. I will be recusing myself from HBC 21-820, 21-821, and 21-825. Basically, the entire cases to be heard portion of the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Horner. Any other commissioners? Okay. Also in supporting us this evening are Lisa Morosic-Murphy with the Planning Department and Scott Waxter from the city's legal department. At this time, I will conduct a swearing in of staff. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the responses given and statements made in this hearing before the Historic Preservation Commission will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth? If so, please answer "I do."
This is Lisa Morosic-Murphy, and I do.
Thank you. All right. The only announcement that I am aware of this evening is the fact that for this evening, we do have a different number for the public to dial if they wish to make comment on any cases or address the commission. And that new number for this evening, again, is 301-600-6285. And I do not believe there are any other announcements. So we can move right into the approval of minutes. And we do have minutes from the July 8th, 2021 hearing and workshop that we've all received from Ms. Piles. Any comments from any commissioners? Any suggested edits? Okay, this is Commissioner Bonin, and I move that we approve the July 8th, 2021 hearing and workshop minutes as submitted.
Commissioner DiPietro, I would second the motion.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Bonin. It's been seconded by Commissioner DiPietro. This is Commissioner Bonin, and I vote aye. Commissioner Bailey?
Mr. Bailey, aye.
Commissioner Horner?
Commissioner Horner, aye.
Commissioner Seibert?
Commissioner Seibert votes aye.
Commissioner Alby?
Commissioner Alby, aye.
And Commissioner DiPietro?
Commissioner DiPietro, aye.
And that is unanimous. Moving on to HPC business, there is one item on the business agenda, and that is a request for demolition review with the property located at 10 through 12 West College Terrace.
All right, this is Lisa Mrazek Murphy, and this request for demolition review has been submitted per section 423A of the Land Management Code for a commercial building that is actually constructed in 3 parts. That's an update to my memo. It's commonly known as Terrace Lanes. The original Terrace Lanes Tenpin Center was constructed in 1960 in the vernacular modern style with Googie influences. This is a style that became associated with a particular subset of post-war commercial buildings. This style is characterized in part by abstract geometric forms, tilted or angled floating roof lines, exaggerated or colorful architectural forms, and tall or large signs with distinctive fonts intended to catch the attention of passing motorists. Intact example of this style are rare in Frederick. The building was likely designed, although we cannot say for sure at this point, by William L. Rudolph. He was a Pasadena, California-based architect whose services were reportedly obtained by the developers for that purpose in 1959. At the time, it was reported that he came out to the site at the request of the developers and made an assessment of the site for the purposes of a bowling alley. Rudolph worked in the modern style and specialized in the design of recreational facilities, resorts, and restaurants, and this included at least 126 bowling alleys. As far as the other parts of the building, the Terrace Office Center addition was constructed in 1969 and features a steel frame with a bronze, aluminum, and glass exterior. There was an extension added to the bowling alley building on the north side in the 1990s. The structure also appears to have significance for its association with the post-war period and its corresponding economic boom, increasing suburbanization and the rise of recreational facilities, with bowling alleys and bowling centers being particularly popular. So staff's preliminary assessment is the structure meets at least 2 of the criteria for designation, that is criteria 1 and criteria 4A. And recommends that the commission submit a historic preservation overlay zoning map amendment for the structure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mrazek Murphy. Before we move further, because like always with these HBOs, it is sort of a unique case, a unique set of circumstances. Even though we typically don't allow for public comment on demolition review. I will allow, in this case, the property owner, property agent, or anyone representing the property to speak without a time limit after the commission has the opportunity to question Ms. Mrazek Murphy. And I will also add that we did receive the testimony from our Christopher Goodwin Associates via email. With that being said, do any of the commissioners have any questions for Ms. Mrazek Murphy?
Commissioner DiPietro, I do have a question. Was the demolition, the proposed demolition, including building 2 as well?
There was a previous demolition certificate to demolish without delay that was issued for that structure. So it was initially submitted along with this application, but once Christina went through our records, she realized that there was a previous demolition review that was still valid. So that's not part of this request.
Thank you for the clarification.
Lisa, this is Commissioner Horner. Does the master plan speak to this property at all regarding HPO or has any significance related to this building?
The comprehensive plan?
Yes, sorry, comprehensive plan.
So in the new comprehensive plan, we no longer have a list of properties that are specifically identified. It directs the commission or the city to use the Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties for or to consider anything that's listed in the Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties. And that is maintained by the Maryland Historical Trust, and that's an inventory that's constantly changing. There's nothing that's been previously documented about this structure in that inventory. That does not mean that it does or does not have significance. And I'm just being reminded that the 2020 plan does not actually take effect until October 1st. So what I just said is irrelevant, but as with the previous plan, the property was not identified in that plan either.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add, that doesn't mean that it does not have significance. That was the list that was in that plan was taken from pulled from previous studies that were done. It was not a complete and thorough survey of the entire city that was done to compile that list.
This is Commissioner Seibert. Do we know the reasoning? I mean, the building's in good condition, it's occupied, the parking lot's full 5 nights a week, if not more. Why the building's being torn down?
There are development plans proposed for the property, but really what the commission, and maybe it's just for your own information, but the commission really at this point is charged with, does it potentially meet the criteria? And would you want to make an application to designate the structure?
That's fair, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the commission for Ms. Marsick-Murphy? This is Commissioner Bonin. Ms. Marsick-Murphy, I do have one question for you. I know in your report you state that this style is exceedingly rare in the city. Can you recall off the top of your head any other examples?
I can't, no.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Ms. Marsick-Murphy from the commission? Okay, if not, then I will turn it over. I will allow the property owner or their agent. It looks like we have Ms. Rollins with us this evening. So I'm just going to read the oath, and any members of the team that wish to speak or plan on speaking, just please one at a time state your name and signify I do. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the responses given and statements made in this hearing before the Historic Preservation Commission will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth? If so, please state your name and answer I do.
This is Ann Rollins. I do.
I do.
Okay. All right. So we have Ann Rollins and Catherine Caranda. Anyone else?
Sam Young, I do.
Molinolo, I do.
Okay. All right. So however you all want to proceed in response to Ms. Marsick-Murphy's staff report, if there's anything more information you want to share with the commission, please feel free to proceed.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, commission members, and staff. For the record, Ann Rollins with Miles and Stockbridge, along with my colleague Noel Nolo. We're here on behalf of High Street Residential. Rich McPhillips, the Senior Vice President, is here listening in this evening. Also here and planning to speak will be Kate Caranda and Sam Young from Goodwin Associates. And I believe Chris Smirga with Harris Smirga may have tuned in as well. As Lisa and Mr. Chairman, you've correctly noted, we're here this evening specifically for this commission's review and decision on whether this property should be subject to an application for the historic preservation overlay process, which was that review was triggered by the fact that a demolition application was submitted to the city. We respectfully submit that an application for a historic preservation overlay, HPO, should not be submitted for this property because other than the fact that the criteria is met for the building being at least 50 years older or more, the property does not meet the other remaining criteria of the Land Management Code Section 423D because first, it does not retain sufficient historical integrity due to changes made over the course of the 50 years it's been there to the structures, the signage and facade over that period of time. Secondly, when it's evaluated in its historical context, the buildings do not embody many of the distinctive characteristics of the Googie style. And the property does not meet any of the other criteria under Section 423D1C. For these reasons, we respectfully request that the Commission decide in this case not to submit an application for an HPO on this property. I'm going to turn it over to and defer to Kate Coranda and Sam Young with Goodwin Associates, who you recognize submitted some written testimony, so that they can elaborate it more completely on the architect, the Googie style, and why this particular property does not meet the criteria of Section 423D. And of course, we're happy to answer any questions. I thank you for allowing us this time this evening, and I'll turn it over to Kate and Sam. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Ann. My name is Kate Coranda, and I'm a Senior Vice President with Goodwin Associates. We're a cultural resource management firm with offices in Frederick. And our firm has been retained by High Street Residential, the potential developers of the property, to assess the architectural and historical significance. All work was done by either myself or Sam Young, and we're architectural historians that exceed the professional qualification standards that are established by the Secretary of the Interior. In determining whether to move forward on this for an HPO, we respectfully request that the Commission consider two major issues. One is the integrity of the building. It's been compromised over the years, and actually the question of and also whether it represents retains all distinguishable features of the Google form, which is typically required as a representative example of applying the criteria and guidance found in Bulletin 13 provided by the National Park Service National Register Program. The Terrace Lane Center was constructed in 1959 to 1960. The adjoining and connected office building was built in 1973. And a substantial addition to the bowling center was constructed in 1997. And that increased the original 24 alleys to 36. So this wasn't a small addition to the building. In addition to construction over the years, the facade has also been changed. A false window was added following a vehicle crash into the building in June of 2020, and the original sign was removed. And a walk-up window for food and beverage service was added in May 2021. Because of the simple design of the building and the emphasis on signage and the Googie influence, the integrity of that facade is particularly important. This is a concrete block building with a simple brick veneer on the front face. Now, the Googie style was primarily developed in Southern California, and the whole purpose was to attract car traffic in decentralized urban areas. It's defined by bold angles, high-profile signs and colorful signs, plate glass, sweeping cantilevered roofs, pop culture, and space age imagery. One of the things that the Googie style did introduce to the development community was using buildings, design, and signage as an advertising technique. And we can see the influence of that nationwide, and it continues today with large box development, think Walmart, and other retail and commercial chains where you can instantly recognize what a property, a building is as you're speeding by at 40 miles an hour. As we mentioned, the bowling alley lacks many of the character-defining features of this style, including the structural geometry, the cantilever roofs, and the signage that generally extends above the roof line. The whole purpose was to attract people as they were motoring by in areas that were generally being developed new. This is an infill construction, by the way. It replaced an earlier tavern and motel in an area that was primarily residential. Signs were colorful and were used as advertisements for the establishment. They were often in neon, and they provided for visibility and contrast. Motifs that were used for sunbursts and boomerangs, space age imagery, and was used for both the signage and building elements. The majority of these designs are also noted for a variation in texture, as well as variation in materials. And again, the location of these properties was critical to their being classified as part of the whole Googie style movement, because they were oriented on major thoroughfares for maximum vehicular visibility. Now, although the architect Rudolph is documented as visiting the site shortly after land acquisition, we have no data to suggest that he continued to actually develop sites. And indeed, when the building was actually opened in 1960, the news coverage fails to mention Rudolph, and while exhaustively listing the owners, the construction company, and all the companies and vendors and persons attached to this building. So those are a couple of major points I appreciate your consideration on as we move forward on this. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any other members of the team?
Mr. Chairman, may I just add one thing to Kate's report?
Absolutely.
And that is that in addition to the comments she made on the architect, Mr. Rudolph, having perhaps visited the site, we have received confirmation from the actual architect was a local architect named Lou Battistone. We've confirmed that from the owners and from Mr. Battistone himself. So just as early as this morning. So that was not in Kate's report, but I just wanted to add that. So, you know, while they may have consulted with Mr. Rudolph on some issues, he was not the architect of this building.
Thank you for that information.
Thank you.
Is there any other information anyone would like to share with the commission? If not, then I will invite any commissioners to ask any questions that they may have.
I have a question for staff. It's Commissioner Seibert. I mean, how are we supposed to take the information that was just verbally conveyed to us that a local architect, not the architect that was described? How are you consider that? It seems doubted in an affidavit of some type or other research to back it up. That's part one. I guess the other one, just for whatever's while I got the floor, I'll ask this. If he designed over 120 bowling alleys, do we have any pictures of those? to know if this truly was one of his kind of standard plans? Maybe he sold to the developer. Just trying to understand.
Sure. So a couple things there. I think it's interesting information. I do know that I believe there was a renovation to the main bowling alley building in 1969 at the same time that construction was underway for the office building. There was actually an article in the Frederick News in October 1969 that construction had started on that. I thought that potentially he may have been associated with the office center portion of the building, but again, as since Corinda stated, we don't have any definitive information that Rudolph was the architect of record for the building. I'm still doing research into Rudolph and looking at some of his other buildings. But I think it's interesting, but it's not necessarily relevant in that the building is, I'm not suggesting at this time that the property would be significant for its association or for its design or by Rudolph or the local architect. It's potentially significant for its architecture and then for its association with the post-war period. And in order to be eligible, it only needs to meet one of the criteria. So whether it does or does not have significance from its architect is not necessarily relevant or change the potential argument in this case.
Thank you very much.
Questions from the commission? This is Commissioner Bonin, and this question, I think Ms. Carando, you might be the most appropriate person for me to direct this question towards. So if not, please feel free to pass it on to who you think may be the best. So I just want to make sure my understanding then is with the changes that you state were made in your written letter, and when I say you, I mean our Christopher Goodwin Associates. I want to say you specifically. That with the changes that were made in the facade, you would then argue that there really was no more historic integrity. Is my understanding correct?
Well, I think the question of design integrity, if it is being considered for association with the Googie style, is something that needs to be considered. The building has been expanded and modified over the years. The influences of the Googie style are primarily focused on the zigzag pent, which is actually, I'm sure you've been out there, so you can see that portions of it are actually anchored off the building, as well as the signage, which is also extends from the building face. So that's another issue of whether, is the building itself, it's an example of a bowling alley, but it's only understood as a bowling alley with the signage and the interior intact.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's a big box. It's basically a big box concrete cinder block building with brick facing.
So I'm sorry.
And then the facade, because it was such an austere design to begin with, has been modified. One of the original sign for Terrace Lane has been removed. There's a false window, and there's also been a walk-up service window for food service that's been recently cut into the facade.
Okay. And would you say that the more recent additions, the office building that was constructed later and then the expansion, would those two additions have they impacted directly the how do I want to phrase this? The elements, I guess the Googie elements. Was there any impact to the elements of the Googie style with from those two additions?
Well, it certainly it changed the freestanding building to a complex that included an office building as well as a major extension that is visible from the front face. So this reads more as a more of a commercial complex with a front parking area rather than a standalone building.
And my last question, and I'll let you go, I promise. As an architectural historian, in your opinion, does it matter that really this is probably the only extant example that we know of a building with any elements of the Googie style? Is that a factor that should be considered in demolition?
Well, I think the question is whether is it an example of the Googie style or is it an example of Googie signage? And once those elements, the zigzag and the zigzag pent and the bowl signage, which are anchored to the building, they're not part of the structure of the building, then what you have a very stripped modern commercial block. So I think the question is whether those two elements can carry the argument. And I'm not sure that the case has been made when you look at true Googie architecture, which was known for its complex geometry, almost bright colors, extensive use of signage that was illuminated, frequently extending way above the roof line, curvilinear and very interesting roof lines that drew attention from that to the upper portion of the building as you were traveling along a highway. This was actually infill construction. It's actually a secondary road. It's off Patrick, but it adjoined actually 3 dwellings when it was constructed. One that has survived. So we're really, the context, which was so important to Googie design, is not there. And by the time of its construction into the 60s, this whole concept of building as advertisement had become pretty much mainstream in the development community. You can see it in any franchise. They're adopting an image that it gets repeated, and they're with consistency in signage, so that they can use their what is essentially a very simple structure through consistent facade treatment and signage to draw in repeat customers and attract new customers. And they're instantly recognizable. It's not only a property type, it becomes branding for a company. It's building as branding. And that's one of the long-term impacts of Googie design.
Thank you, Ms. Curry. I appreciate it. Questions from any other commissioners? If there are no other questions, then is there discussion amongst the commissioners, concerns, or any information they'd like to share with each other? Thoughts?
This is Commissioner Alby. I have some thoughts to share for the commission's consideration. Keeping in mind that staff hasn't had the opportunity to do in-depth research because we have yet to determine whether or not that in-depth research is appropriate. What I would offer is that I'm less concerned about whether or not this property is a representation of the Googie style or whether or not it's an example of Rudolph's design, and more interested in this building within the context of the city of Frederick and mid-century modern. So what I find to be the most compelling consideration with this building is just the clear communication of mid-century modern, and specifically in a commercial context here. And I would ask the commissioners to consider what you know about the city of Frederick, and not just the downtown, but the full city of Frederick, and how many recognizable mid-century modern buildings can you think of? I sort of jotted down, and I just finished surveying close to 5,000 buildings in the city. So I was thinking, you know, what are the mid-century modern buildings that Frederick has to show for itself? And the list is very short and getting shorter by the decade as demolition applications are put forward for this kind of architecture. Specifically, some of the ones that jump out for me are the bank across West Patrick Street from Terrace Lanes, which has always kind of grabbed my attention. The post office at College Estates, although that's not a commercial building, it was associated with a commercial shopping center from the mid-century, which incidentally was at one time very reflective of the period and has since been renovated, so it really no longer represents that mid-century modern, although the post office does. The bank on West 2nd Street, which is actually a early 19th century building, but has, and probably may have even been a bank, but was clearly a mid-century facade renovation, which is very distinctly mid-century modern, and as such is pretty rare, particularly in downtown. TJ High School, although there has been some discussion of alterations to the fenestration, it's still a very recognizable mid-century building. When it comes to residences, I can only think of two. It's a very uncommon architectural style for dwellings. On the other hand, I can think of some that we've lost recently. One is the Barbara Fritchie restaurant, which, whether or not it is technically a demolition, it might as well be a demolition based upon the changes that have been made over the past few years. The Frederick Brick Company building at the corner of East and South was a good downtown example of mid-century modern. We have some other industrial examples on East South Street and East Church Street. But if you think about mid-century modernism and its association with suburban development and commercial strips, we really don't have extant examples of that in the city. And so whether or not this meets the pure academic definition of Googie doesn't really matter to me. Whether it's a big box with just a facade, to me that reads kind of as a mid-century modern commercial strip kind of approach. I don't really care who the architect is. It'd be cool if it was someone recognizable, but that to me is irrelevant when considering the contribution that the building makes to the historic fabric in the city of Frederick. So with that in mind, just a couple other points that I would offer for consideration. One is that this section of Frederick between West College and right around there with that shopping center and going west towards the not the Francis Scott Key, but the Frederick Town Mall and down towards that area. This is a notable and clearly defined mid-century expansion area for the city. And this building, Terrace Lanes, is part of that. And clearly is associated with the residential neighborhoods from the mid-century that are around it to the west and the southwest. The other thing I would say is that I've been on the designation committee for the HPC for 5 or 6 years. And we have specifically discussed in the committee the lack of representation of mid-century modern resources and the need to recognize these buildings before they are threatened. So for all of these reasons, I would certainly be in favor of putting together a staff working on a nomination designation package for this resource so that we can learn more and that we all have an opportunity to consider the information that is put together for us.
Thank you, Commissioner Alby. Anything else from any other commissioners?
Commissioner Bailey, I'm heard the applicant or the representatives and reading their testimonial. To me, when we're talking about the Gucci style, it's a bowling alley. So to an extent, does, form follow function here, where I understand that a large part of the structure is a box. But when looking at their own definition of things that are character defining features for the style, colorful signs and adverts, listing space age imagery or shapes for pillars, roofs, and signage. To what degree do you rank a structure signage? To me, it's all part of it. Orientation on a major thoroughfare. True, it's not on Patrick, but to me, that's a fairly well-traveled road. And I know, at least for me, when I drive past it, I always look at that bowling alley because I cannot think of another example of that. And it seems pretty space agey to me. And then even talking about how it was influencing big box stores of today. Okay, so it's a box, but it's influencing big box stores. Maybe this is an early example of how it was taking that leap. So I'm still in the middle. I'm not quite sure where I'm landing on this, but I can, at least for me, I think there's some definite parts to what this bowling alley has that are representative for the character defining features for the style. And that sign is just, not to make a pun, but it's out of this world. I can't think of another spot where I've seen a sign like that. The closest thing is some of the things you see on the Ohio Turnpike.
This is Lisa. I just want to kind of jump in and just state, because in case my staff memo and presentation wasn't clear, I'm not suggesting that this is a pure example of the Googie style or the highest example of the style. It's definitely a vernacular, minimalist, modern building with Googie influences. So I am aware and acknowledge it is not, the purest and best example of the style.
This is Commissioner Bona. Ms. Mrazek-Murphy, I have a question for you. And it's speaking to the fact that this does abut a residential neighborhood. And prior to the construction of the bowling alley, it was a residential property. Are you aware, or would we be able to possibly determine if there were any height restrictions that would have been in place because of the proximity to residences that would have prevented higher, more flashy signage in that locality?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I mean, it may be something that I would come across in further research. It did actually replace a restaurant, a tavern, in a tourist cabins on the site prior. So there were residential properties adjacent, but it was a commercial property prior to being a bowling alley. And actually, there was a pretty heated zoning battle, a Board of Zoning Appeals case related to the development of the bowling alley initially. But I didn't see any references specifically to concerns about height or signage.
Okay, thank you. And for what it's worth, just for us to, in keeping in line, with the conversation about this potentially signifying post-war suburban movement, or in the general area at the time, I can't speak tonight. The surrounding area has definitely changed around this building over the past, 50, 60 years. But there was an adjacent mini golf putt-putt, 18-hole putt-putt. Across the street, there was the Town and Country restaurant. Across College was Snug's restaurant. The used car lot, prior to being a used car lot, was a mobile station. So there was activity, and there were things going on that would have been pulling people out of downtown in this direction in their cars. So while the argument could be made that it is situated on West College and therefore not on the main thoroughfare, it was a heavily traveled area. And it's still a heavily traveled area today. It's just changed. But in the context of 1960, when this was constructed, that I think should be taken into consideration as well.
Sure, I think the location is, and I think Commissioner Alby alluded to that, is that this is, there were some, the residential development in this area after the war was huge. I mean, there were numerous subdivisions that were going up like overnight. And, this was part of it, the sort of consumer culture, the increased economic prosperity, the auto-oriented development. This is all part of that.
Any other viewpoints or?
This is Commissioner Seibert, and a couple things. I've not looked at more bowling alleys in my life since this came across our desks. It's hard to make a decision based on we have initial findings. I don't want to call it scant, but we have difference of opinion that needs some more research to identify. I believe that's one. I do feel it's a prime example of vernacular mid-century signage that's taking a box and trying to make it look like something else. It's in my memory for at least the last 40 plus years of something that does catch your attention as you come into town, China Garden being the other, and the bank building up on the hill there. And the pawn shop actually at one time had more boogie vernacular appurtenances on it that have been stripped off in the time I've lived right in town. So it is part of a neighborhood. And back to the mobile station, it is actually in the Mount Vernon style. If you look at the cupola, that was kind of a common thing. 7-Elevens had them, the AMP stores had them. There's remnants of our community that are there. So part of me feels that this is not enough information to make a decision. So my question to Lisa is this something that can be continued and more information gathered? Is that a possibility?
No, there is a very short time frame for the demolition review. The commission has 15 days from being notified that there is a request for demolition review to make a decision whether or not they're going to make an application. If you don't make a decision within that time frame, then the certificate to demolish without delay is automatically issued. And
we are not to know the impetus for that. That was what you said earlier. I'm just asking again for the demolition, because it's a perfectly serviceable building. I could understand it if it was deteriorated and was a public nuisance or some other concern. That's a different type of argument.
Yeah, there should be some. It's going to be a residential multifamily development, I believe. There is a site plan in for the project, and that's how this demolition review came about.
This is Commissioner Bonin and Ms. Marsdick Murphy. Just for clarity's sake, if there are those of us on the commission that feel as though more time is needed to do some further research, really the only way to achieve that would be for us to put forward a positive recommendation for the commission to proceed with the HPO, which would then allow some time between now and when staff would have to present to the zoning board, the zoning commission.
Well, right, so the way it would work is, so the next step, if the commission voted tonight to make the application, staff would prepare that application on the commission's behalf and file it, take care of all the public notice. Part of that would include preparing historical context and architectural description, and now a more formal analysis based on the criteria. That would come back to a hearing before the commission, and that has to happen within 30 days. So, and then if the commission recommends approval of the application to the mayor and board and planning commission, then the application would proceed to planning commission for their recommendation and then to mayor and board for ultimate approval or denial of the request. If the commission holds that, decides to make the HPO application and then at the hearing within 30 days decides, based on this, you'll have a staff recommendation as well. But if you find that in that designation report that you find then that it's very clear now it doesn't meet the criteria, or it does, if you decide not to make it forward a positive recommendation, then the process ends there, and the applicant is issued a certificate to demolish without delay, and then they can proceed and get their demolition permits.
So thank you. And then so just for those of us who maybe have not been involved in this process before, or this is the first time watching it on television, if we were to move forward this evening recommending that the commission submit the HPO application, it actually then within 30 days. So essentially, if we vote in the affirmative this evening, it's not to move forward with the HPO. It's essentially, in essence, authorizing an application to be put together on our behalf to come before us to vote on. Is that accurate?
That's correct. And yeah, right. So right now it's, is there enough information that it looks like there may be the potential for a property that meets the criteria. You don't have to determine tonight does it meet the criteria, but I would say, is there enough evidence that there is potential there? And it warrants further discussion at a hearing and all the public notice. We send the letters to the property owners, the adjacent property owners, and public notice signs and all of that, so that the purpose of this process is to make any demolition of a building that's over 50 years, give the community an opportunity to comment and provide input, and for the commission to provide input on that before a demolition occurs. So it's a process for facilitating that.
And because we wouldn't be moving forward with an official HPO application this evening, or a vote on the application, while I'm sure Mr. Waxter would love for us to articulate our reasons for voting this evening, there isn't necessarily a mandate that we stipulate it is 50 years of age and all the different criteria, because we're not actually approving an HPO application this evening. Is my understanding correct?
That sounds about how I would have described it. Yeah, you got it right.
Thank you. All right, and I'm done hogging the microphone now. So are there any other commissioners that would like to weigh in? Or if not, are there any commissioners willing to make a motion?
This is Commissioner Alby. I'm prepared to make a motion. I move, I'm familiar with the property at 12 West College Terrace. And I move that the commission submit a historic preservation overlay zoning map amendment for the structure, which is for staff, authorizes staff to move forward with research and prepare an application for consideration. On the grounds that the property demonstrates characteristics that suggest that it could meet the designation criteria for the city.
Commissioner Horner, a second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Alby. It's been seconded by Commissioner Horner. Is there any discussion on the motion from the commissioners? Hearing none, this is Commissioner Bonin and I vote aye. Commissioner Alby?
Commissioner Alby, aye.
Commissioner Horner?
Commissioner Horner, aye.
Commissioner Bailey?
Commissioner Bailey, aye.
Commissioner Seibert?
Commissioner Seibert votes aye.
And Commissioner DePietro?
Commissioner DePietro, aye.
And that is unanimous. Thank you all. We look forward to seeing you again in a few weeks.
Thank you.
Moving on, well, we have no items on the consent agenda, no items that have been continued, so we can move on to our first case for hearing this evening, which is HPC 21-820 with property located at 105 East 5th Street. Again, if there are any members of the public who wish to make comment on this case, they may do so by dialing 301-600-6285 and taking a roll of commissioners present. This is Commissioner Bonin. I am present. Commissioner Bailey.
Commissioner Bailey, present.
Commissioner Horner. Has recused himself. Commissioner Seibert.
Commissioner Seibert present.
And Commissioner DePietro.
Commissioner DePietro, present.
And did I skip Commissioner Alby?
Commissioner Alby is present.
All right. I believe that is everyone. So Ms. Marzek-Murphy, whenever you're ready.
Okay, this is Lisa Marzek-Murphy. I've been sworn in and I would like to enter the entire staff report into the record. This application concerns the demolition of a brick stoop at the front entrance of a 1.5-story brick dwelling dating from the early 19th century. The stoop will be replaced with a new parge block and concrete stoop with a simple metal railing. That's the new stoop is being considered under HBC 21-821. According to the Fredericktown Historic District Design Guidelines, when making a decision regarding demolition, the Commission must consider the degree of importance of the resource in the proposed replacement plan for the resource. The degree of importance of the resource is evaluated with respect to its historical, archaeological, and architectural value, including its integrity, and found to either be contributing or non-contributing to the historic district. Contributing resources are those buildings, structures, sites, or objects that help define the district, that add historical or architectural value, and generally those buildings, structures, sites, or objects that were built during the historic district's period of significance. Non-contributing resources are those buildings, structures, sites, or objects that do not help define the historic district and do not add historical or architectural value to the district. Generally, resources that are less than 50 years old are non-contributing. Although the current stoop dates from the mid-20th century, the resource as a whole exhibits architectural and historic value for being a good example of an early 19th century English vernacular dwelling, and the resource also retains integrity. With that, staff recommends the Commission find the early 19th century dwelling to be a contributing resource to the historic district, and just noting that would, if the Commission finds that it is a contributing resource, you would not be able to vote on the demolition until the subsequent meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Marzek-Murphy. Is the applicant with us this evening?
Yes, this is Brian Bradfield representing the applicant.
All right, Mr. Bradfield, I'm just going to read the oath and we can move on. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the responses given and statements made in this hearing before the Historic Preservation Commission will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth? If so, please state your name and answer. I do.
Brian Bradfield, I do.
Thank you, Mr. Bradfield. Is there anything further you'd like to share with us after hearing the staff report?
No, actually, we are in agreement with the staff report. Some of you may recall we've already had an addition approved by this commission last year. The stoop, I believe, is considered as part of the original home. The original home is clearly a contributing resource, so the stoop, we are in agreement, would be considered a contributing resource.
Okay, thank you. So are there any questions from the commission for Mr. Bradfield? If there are no questions, then I will open up public comment. Again, if any members of the public wish to make comment on this case, they may do so by dialing 301-600-6285. And I'll give about a half minute for those wishing to dial in to do so. All right, it does not appear that anyone is dialing in. I will close public comment at this time. Do any commissioners have any questions for Ms. Marslick-Murphy? Any discussion amongst one another? Or anyone willing to make a motion?
Commissioner DePietro, I have a question for Mr. Bradfield, actually. I noticed that on the work, on the note that you provided, that the brick pavers are going to be replaced with the ones that are similar to next door. Why not replace them with the hexagon shaped ones that are already there? What was behind that decision?
I think this is Brian Bradfield. I think that decision came kind of twofold. The homeowners actually like the looks of the more traditional rectangular brick pavers. And in reading the HPC guidelines, they seem to be the preferred paver replacement. Clearly, the existing hexagonal ones, maybe 20 to 25% could be salvaged and possibly be reused, which then brings into question, would we be able to find duplicates enough to continue, or would we have to replace everything regardless? So that's when we kind of came to the decision to continue the pattern and the paver look of what's at 107 adjacent to this property.
Thank you for the clarification.
Are there any other questions regarding the contributing status?
This is Commissioner Cyber. I have a question for Ms. Marslick-Murphy. Are this hexagonal paver, the only other place I'm aware of, it's in front of the funeral home on Church Street? It's Church. I mean, to me, this should be retained based on that it is predates most of the other brick sidewalks in the area. Is that supported by the guidelines? I didn't look that up until just this moment.
Well, a couple of things. The application 21-820 is specifically for the demolition of the stoop. And then the commission's first decision is whether the resource, when we're considering the resource, we're looking at the resource as a whole. So is that contributing or not? The next application on the agenda would be, it addresses the replacement plan, which is the new stoop. And there is a staff report for that case, and it did not address the pavers because the minor rehabilitation list does indicate that you can replace brick with brick. It doesn't distinguish between the type of brick pavers. So in our assessment, they would not need HPC approval to do brick with brick as long as they're doing it with according to city standard.
And currently, that's not on the table anyway. That's the section. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll step back from that. And thank you for answering my question.
All right. Is there any other discussion regarding the contributing status of the property? And again, just for the record, I just want to state that if the commission were to find the property to be contributing this evening, that does not then prohibit a future demolition of any element of the property. It just means that we found the property to be contributing this evening. Right. Are there any commissioners willing to make a motion?
This is Commissioner Alby, prepared to make a motion familiar with HPC 21-820 regarding the property at 105 East Fifth Street. And I move that the commission find the 19th century dwelling to be a contributing resource to the historic district because of its dated construction and the fact that it's an intact example of a small English vernacular dwelling.
It's Commissioner Seibert, and a second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Alby. It's been seconded by Commissioner Seibert. Is there any discussion on the motion? This is Commissioner Bonin, and I vote aye. Commissioner Bailey?
Commissioner Bailey, aye.
Commissioner Alby?
Commissioner Alby, aye.
Commissioner Seibert?
Commissioner Seibert, aye.
Commissioner DePietro?
Commissioner DePietro, aye.
That is 5 in favor with Commissioner Horner recusing himself. That is unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Bradfield.
Thank you.
All right, our next case this evening is HPC 21-821 at 105 East 5th Street, and I believe we will now have to continue this case to the August 12th hearing. And I just want to confirm, well, that we really don't have the option there. It is the 12th, and then if the applicant wants to push that out further, they can request that at a later date.
Question from the applicant, if it pleases the commission.
Yes, Mr. Bradfield.
Yeah, continuing makes perfect sense. We had already anticipated that. We would like to, our original intent was actually to have this part at workshop as opposed to hearing. Would it be out of line to ask if we could move at least a discussion of the replacement plan to a workshop?
Is there any issue with that, with it not having been advertised?
This is Lisa. Workshops do not have to be advertised, and we didn't put it on that agenda because we didn't feel that it needed a workshop. But if it's the desire of the commission and the applicant to have a workshop discussion, it could be.
It was just our concern. There are, as one of the commissioners just brought up, maybe some issues about materials or anything of that nature. We anticipated that this would be moved, found contributing. So we thought we would take this opportunity tonight just to hear if there were any other objections before proceeding to hearing, to try and iron them out before we get to that point.
This is Commissioner Bonin. Ms. Marsick-Murphy, do you have any concerns, or are you about being prepared for discussion such as that this evening?
No, I have no concerns about that. We do have a staff report prepared for that. If it wasn't for the needing to wait for one more meeting for the demolition decision, I would be recommending approval for that work. So I don't see any problem having a workshop if it's felt that it's needed.
Okay. And I know we have done this in the past, but it's been a while. Do we need a full vote from the commission, or is that just, this might be a question for Mr. Waxter.
This is Lisa. I don't.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Scott. I wasn't sure.
So do you need a full vote from the commission to do what? To move it?
Yes. Or as the chair, can I just?
Well, no, I think we should move, if you're going to vote to take it to a workshop. I thought my different question is, are you planning on workshopping it tonight? Is that what the applicant wants? Or do you want to postpone until the next meeting for a workshop at that meeting, which would then lead us to the following meeting for an actual decision? What is the applicant looking for?
This evening.
This evening. We've done that many times where you've moved a case to the workshop of that evening. I don't know if, Lisa, are you prepared? Are you ready to have a workshop about this if we need to?
I'm ready to have a hearing on it. So yeah, we can.
Sure.
Do
Then
this.
you should.
Yeah.
Then there should be a vote, Mr. Chairman, to continue it to the next meeting, and at the same time you could say, and let's set it in for a workshop later this evening. But the vote is to continue it with a workshop pending, and hey, that workshop's going to be tonight.
Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Waxter. Mr. Bradfield, is there anything else? Well, no.
That would be perfectly okay.
Okay. All right. Well, then this is Commissioner Bonin, and I am familiar with HPC 21-821, property located at 105 East 5th Street, and I move that we continue this case to the August 12th hearing, as well as move it to a workshop this evening.
It's Commissioner Bailey, and I second the motion.
It's a motion by Commissioner Bonin. It's been seconded by Commissioner Bailey. Is there any discussion on the motion?
The only thing I would add, Mr. Chairman, is that just for anybody watching, that workshop this evening is going to take place immediately following this short break. So everyone who wants to be or is able to listen to that, it'll be tonight immediately following this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Wexler. Again, so we have a motion by Commissioner Bonin. It's been seconded by Commissioner Bailey. Discussion on the motion. It's Commissioner Bonin, and I vote aye. Commissioner Bailey?
Mr. Bailey, aye.
Commissioner Alby?
Commissioner Alby, aye.
Commissioner DePietro?
Commissioner DePietro, aye.
And Commissioner Seibert?
No worries, I'll take up the end.
I'm mixing it up tonight.
Oh,
Commissioner Horner has,
you don't know where to put me.
Commissioner Horner has recused himself. That is 5 in favor, with Commissioner Horner being recused. Motion carries. Moving on to our last case this evening is HPC 21-825, property located at 622 North Market Street. Again, if any members of the public wish to make comment on this case, they may do so by dialing 301-600-6285 and taking roll of commissioners present. This is Commissioner Bonin, and I am present. Commissioner Bailey?
Commissioner Bailey, I'm present.
Commissioner Alby?
Commissioner Alby, present.
Commissioner Seibert?
Commissioner Seibert's present.
And Commissioner DePietro?
Commissioner DePietro, present.
All right, Ms. Marsick-Murphy, whenever you're ready.
Okay, this is Lisa Morozic-Murphy. I'd like to enter the entire staff report into the record and note that I've been sworn in. This application concerns alteration to the west wall of the rear brick and block service building dating from circa 1950. Proposed alterations include the replacement of an existing overhead door with a new aluminum glass overhead door and the creation of a new opening with a full view aluminum door in the area of a former window opening. The Fredericktown Historic District Design Guidelines state that adaptive use refers to modifications that render a building usable for a function other than originally intended. These guidelines are intended to encourage the adaptive use of properties as long as character-defining features are not compromised. New window and door piercings may be permitted on a case-by-case basis and generally only to access or accommodate an addition. Character-defining features of service buildings must be identified, repaired, and preserved, whether or not the original function still exists. And over time, features of service buildings may have been altered or concealed. As appropriate, the rehabilitation of historic industrial and service buildings may include returning the buildings to their historic appearance. According to Sanborn Fire Insurance maps, the original automobile sales and service building was constructed between 1911 and 1922, while the brick and block addition was constructed between 1947 and 1960. The original building has been highly altered, compromising the resource's overall integrity. Additionally, the overhead door is not original to the addition, and its replacement with a modern overhead door with glass panels is appropriate. The new man door opening will be in the area of a former window opening that has long been filled in with brick, which allows for the retention of original windows and brickwork in other areas of the building. The proposed overhead and storefront door are a similar treatment to openings elsewhere on the building, and particularly in the area of the main automobile service building. And with that, staff is recommending approval of the application.
Thank you. Is the applicant with us this evening or their agent?
I am Chris Benjamin, the agent for the, I'm the applicant and the agent for the owner.
All right, Mr. Benjamin, I'm just going to read the oath to swear you in, and we can move on. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the responses given and statements made in this hearing before the Historic Preservation Commission will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth? If so, please state your name and answer I do.
My name is Chris Benjamin, and I do.
Thank you, Mr. Benjamin. After hearing Ms. Morozic-Murphy's staff report, is there anything else you'd like to add or share with the commission?
No, I think that was a very complete report.
All right, thank you. Do any commissioners have any questions for Mr. Benjamin? All right, if there are no questions, I will open the floor to public comment. If any members of the public wish to make comment on this case, they may do so by dialing 301-600-6285. Does not appear that anyone is dialing in. I will close public comment at this time. Do any commissioners have any questions for Ms. Marsig-Murphy? Last minute discussion amongst one another. Is there anyone willing to make a motion? All right, this is Commissioner Bonin, and I am familiar with HPC 21-825 with a property located at 622 North Market Street, and I move that we approve the application as submitted.
This is Commissioner Seibert, and I second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Bonin. It's been seconded by Commissioner Seibert. Is there any discussion on the motion? It's Commissioner Bonin, and I vote aye. Commissioner Bailey?
Commissioner Bailey, aye.
Commissioner Seibert?
Commissioner Seibert votes aye.
Commissioner Alby?
Commissioner Alby, aye.
And Commissioner DePietro?
Commissioner DePietro, aye.
That is 5 in favor with Commissioner Horner recusing himself. Motion carries. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Moving on to citizen comment. If any members of the public wish to make comment or wish to address the commission for any reason this evening, they may do so by dialing 301-600-6285, and I'll give half a minute or so for those wishing to dial in to do so. It does not appear anyone is dialing in. I will close citizen comment at this time, and that does complete or conclude the City of Frederick Historic Preservation Commission hearing for Thursday, July 22nd, 2021. We do have a workshop, and I would just assume roll right into that workshop unless anyone has a strong objection otherwise.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Then I will call to order the City of Frederick Historic Preservation Commission workshop for Thursday, July 22nd, 2021. And just taking roll of commissioners present. This is Commissioner Bonin, I am present. Commissioner Bailey.
Commissioner Bailey, present.
Commissioner Seibert.
Commissioner Seibert present.
Commissioner Alby.
Commissioner Alby, present.
Commissioner DePietro.
Commissioner DePietro, present.
And I just want to confirm, Commissioner Horner, I don't believe you've rejoined us, but if you're here, please say so. All right, if not, then we can move into our first and last item to discuss this evening, HPC 21-821, the property located at 105 East 5th Street. Ms. Marsig-Murphy, whenever you're ready.
Sure, yep. So this application concerns the construction of a new parge block and concrete stoop with a simple metal railing at the front entrance of a resource dating from the early 19th century, and it serves as the replacement plan for the demolition proposed in HPC 21-820. At the hearing this evening, the resource was found to be contributing. I've outlined the relevant sections from the Fredericktown Historic District Design Guidelines from pages 67 to 68, which address front porch stoops. As far as staff comments go, The existing brick stoop dates from the mid-20th century and is not considered to be a historically significant alteration or to be a character-defining feature. Based on the style and age of the building, as well as photographic evidence, it is known that earlier iterations of the stoop were simple wooden platforms with no railings. The historic configuration could not be replicated under current codes, which require a railing. The historic and original stoops also feature shallow landings, or I should say historic and existing stoops also feature shallow landings that reduce functionality and do not meet current codes. As a result, the proposed replacement stoop will be slightly larger than the existing. And in this case, a concrete stoop with a simple metal railing is an unobtrusive and appropriate solution that maintains the character of the historic resource while being compatible with the neighborhood and the streetscape.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Marzick-Murphy. Mr. Bradfield, if you just kind of want to, well, first for the record, if you could just please, affirm that you have been sworn previously this evening.
This is Brian Bradfield representing the applicant, and I have been sworn in this evening.
Okay.
I think Lisa's report captures everything. And first, thank you for the indulgence of doing this workshop kind of on the spur. I guess we believe we've brought a new stoop design to help improve the safety and practicality of the home at 105. And I just wanted to have the opportunity to hear if any of the commissioners have any concerns regarding the brick pavers, even though we may be able to replace them in kind, the railing detail, the stoop detail. Any concerns, we'd like to kind of, if they want to air them today, and we could take those under consideration prior to the next meeting.
Commissioner Bailey, Mr. Bradfield, do we have any idea when those hexagonal brick pavers were established?
I can tell you, I do not, and I agree with the one commissioner. They are rare in the area. We walked up and down that street and did not see any other examples. So to answer specifically when they may have been installed, I do not have any evidence or answer to that.
Thank you.
I mean, if you look at the 1936 photograph that was included from the HABS collection, it appears that's that paving in front of the house and then the neighbor house that's been infilled have a different texture to them than bricks to the adjacent properties. It appears that they are hexagonal. That's kind of how it reads. And I'm just wondering if it's possible to, I didn't see that 25, I looked at it as 25% may not be salvaged. There's a handful of split ones and it's hard to tell because there's some weeds.
Yes.
If you're going to make a bigger footprint of your stoop, so you're going to have some brick that are exposed now that won't be needed. It would be nice to see them saved if possible, I guess is the suggestion. I know it exceeds the minimum requirements, but given it's rare, it would be nice to see if we can retain them.
Again, I would just respond to that, Commissioner Seibert. It's something we'll certainly I'll talk to the homeowner with. Again, kind of reading the guidelines, it seems like the hexagonals were discouraged a little bit. Maybe Lisa can correct me. I don't know if they're part of the city standards or not, but we will certainly take it under consideration.
You're on mute, Lisa.
All right, sorry about that. I don't believe the city standard addressed that hexagonal brick paver. And again, it's the minor rehabilitation list says that approval is not required to replace brick sidewalks with brick sidewalks. It doesn't distinguish between the type and shape of brick paver.
This is Commissioner Bailey. One thing I definitely want to point out is that even though it's brick material and masonry material, the guidelines for masonry on a building and a structure are definitely different than what they have under paving materials on page 52. As Mr. Bradfield said here, it looks like they're talking about how, we have to, it must utilize a city standard shape and pattern. But then at the end, it talks about how brick shapes and patterns not included in city standards, including hexagonal shaped, may be approved on a case-by-case basis. So at least from that reading tonight, I don't feel like it's something where it's the same thing of where it has to be replaced. At least that's how
Yeah, the way that I interpret that guideline is if you are going to replace concrete with brick or some other sort of paving with brick, that's a case when you would need approval, and the hexagonal may be considered in that case, but my opinion, at least, is that approval is not required to replace brick with brick, regardless of the shape.
I guess my perspective as Commissioner Seibert again is it's identify, retain, and preserve is our mantra of the Park Service. And they're replacing the stoop, not necessarily replacing the sidewalk. You have the ability, it's repairable, I guess, if you look at it, and then repairable with an alternative plan. If you have 25% you can't make up, blend it into the neighbor sidewalk with that material. That to me would be the ideal, given we have true historic fabric. It's not a concrete sidewalk from 1970, which is almost 50 years old now, and it's not a brick sidewalk from the 1990s when a lot of brick sidewalks were being used. To me, it's original historic fabric. We would ask for the same thing in the stone wall. That's my position. Given it's so unique in the downtown, and not unique because of an artistic rendition done through Will. It was part of the original city's sidewalk. That's my thoughts.
Commissioner DePietro, I would concur with that, and I also think it's somewhat unique in the fact that there's not a lot in the city. I think if they could get the hexagon shaped bricks, if that's possible, I'd like to see it considered. Thank you.
This is Commissioner Bonin, and I agree with you, Commissioner Seibert, in that, and looking at the Habs photograph, it does appear that the shadow, it appears that it may be a different material or a different pattern, but I don't necessarily read that as evidence of the hexagonal bricks. You may have seen more photographs than I and be able to readily point that out, but to me, I'm having a hard time identifying that is what it is. And if with my interpretation of the guidelines, joined with, we really don't, in my opinion, have evidence that these were the original pavers or how old these pavers really truly are. I think I agree more with Ms. Marzig-Murphy in that replacing brick with brick, regardless of the color or pattern, as long as it meets the guidelines, is fine with me. Respectfully.
Again, I guess to kind of close this up, the homeowner is listening tonight, so we will discuss this certainly before the hearing to see if we want to propose an either or a change. It's just kind of came out a little bit out of left field from the perspective of us tonight. So, but this is why I wanted to have the workshop. So. Thank you.
Mr. Bradfield, did you get what you needed as far as input for the stoop itself and railing? I know you had asked.
I'm hearing no objection, so I usually with this commission, if there's not an objection being voiced, that's usually a pretty good sign.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you had, you got if you were looking for feedback, you got what you needed is all.
I believe so, unless, like I said, if there's any objections, I'm sure this commission would voice them.
Are there any commissioners who haven't, I'm sorry, Commissioner Bailey?
Yeah, just one final thought, and I apologize to my fellow commissioners if this is kind of out in left field. But actually on page 101, it shows one of the examples of hexagonal paving at 106 East Church Street. And there, what I'm noting is the fact that it's not just hexagonal. You do have hexagonal and your standard, rectangular brick. So as Mr. Bradford said, perhaps this is not a question of either or, but perhaps depending on how much of those brick pavers could be retained, a combination of both. In this case, because I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, that I can't read that photograph to know what the heck is there or what the pattern was. I don't necessarily have the concern for a false sense of history. But maybe there's a way of where we can actually kind of do both in this case. I don't know if I would be opposed to both.
Are there any other comments or input from any other commissioners? Ms. Marsick-Murphy?
Nothing from staff.
Mr. Bradfield, anything last minute you'd like to?
No, thank you, Commissioner Bailey. I hadn't noticed that photo, but that's a nice combination. And it may be a way to, my only concern was not having this hard transition between 107, this property, and then the concrete at 103. This would at least present a possible idea to blend with 107. So we will just certainly discuss that. Otherwise, I think we're good.
All right, if there's nothing further then, I thank you all. And that will conclude the City of Frederick Historic Preservation Commission workshop for Thursday, July 22nd, 2021. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you.